The first thing they noticed was the quiet. Not the empty kind of quiet, but the kind that feels like it has been waiting for you. Ethan Walker stood at the edge of the gravel road, a worn duffel bag slung over his shoulder. He was 17, tall for his age, lean from too many restless nights. His brown hair fell across his forehead in a way his mother used to smooth back with her hand. Beside him stood his younger brother, Caleb, 12 years old, smaller, still round in the face, holding a faded backpack with both straps pulled tight, as if it might drift away if he loosened his grip. They had not spoken for the last mile of the walk. Ahead of them, the farmhouse rested in the soft glow of late afternoon light. Red barn to the right, white porch stretching across the front, a rocking chair tilted gently in the breeze, and standing there on the porch, wearing yellow overalls and a light gray shirt, was their grandfather, Thomas Walker. He was not a tall man, not broad-shouldered like Ethan, but there was something steady about him. His dark skin carried the warm tone of someone who had worked under the sun for most of his life. His hands were open at his sides, not stiff, not uncertain, just open. He stepped down from the porch and walked toward them slowly. "Boys," he said. His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that did not rush ahead of itself. Ethan shifted the bag on his shoulder. He wanted to say something strong, something grown up, but his throat felt tight. Caleb looked down at his shoes. Thomas stopped a few steps away, giving them space, not too close, not too far. "I'm real sorry you had to make this trip under these circumstances," he said gently. The wind moved through the tall grass beside the road. The barn door creaked once. Ethan nodded. "We're okay," he said automatically. But they weren't. 3 weeks earlier, a rain-slick highway had taken both their parents in a single moment. There had been hospital rooms, paperwork, neighbors bringing casseroles in aluminum trays, too many adults speaking in careful, lowered voices. And now, here. Thomas cleared his throat softly. "Well," he said, "this place may be old, but it's still family." He held out his arms then, not wide, just enough. Caleb stepped forward first, and when the older man wrapped his arms around the boy, it was not a dramatic embrace. It was steady, firm, safe. Ethan followed a second later. For a long moment, the three of them simply stood there on the gravel road. The sun began to sink lower behind the trees, and something inside Ethan, something that had been clenched tight for weeks, loosened just a little. The farmhouse had not changed much in 20 years. The kitchen still smelled faintly of coffee and cinnamon. The wooden table bore the same scratch marks from when Ethan's father had carved his initials as a boy. Caleb ran his fingers along the windowsill that overlooked the fields. "Dad used to talk about this place," he said quietly. Thomas nodded. "Your father learned to drive that old tractor before he learned to shave." A small smile passed between them. That first evening, Thomas made chicken stew the way his wife had taught him decades earlier. He moved slowly around the kitchen, explaining each step, not because the boys needed to know, but because silence felt heavier than conversation. Ethan watched him. There was no rush in the old man's movements, no bitterness in his voice, just patience. After supper, they sat on the porch. The sky turned soft shades of pink and blue. Crickets began their evening song. Thomas rocked gently in his chair. "You boys don't have to figure everything out tonight," he said after a while. "Grief's not a math problem. It's more like weather. Comes and goes. Some days are storms, some days are clear." Caleb leaned his head back against the wall. Ethan stared out at the field. No one had explained it like that before. The days began to take shape. Mornings came early on the farm. Thomas believed in rising with the sun, but he did not bark orders. He would simply knock softly on their doors and say, "Coffee's on." Ethan started helping with the fence line. He liked the rhythm of the work. Hammer, wire, step, repeat. It kept his mind steady. Caleb took to feeding the chickens. He spoke to them quietly as he scattered grain. The animals did not ask him how he was feeling. They just clucked and carried on. One afternoon, while repairing a section of barn siding, Ethan finally spoke what had been sitting heavy in his chest. "I keep thinking, maybe if I'd asked them not to go out that night." Thomas did not interrupt. He kept holding the board in place while Ethan drove in the nail. After a moment, the older man said, "Regret's a heavy thing to carry, But it doesn't change the road behind you. Ethan swallowed. Thomas continued, your parents loved you boys. That's the part that doesn't disappear. The words were simple, but they landed. On Sundays, they attended the small country church down the road. People there remembered Ethan and Caleb as toddlers running between pews. They shook hands. They hugged. They did not stare. After service, Mrs. Henderson pressed a pie into Caleb's hands. Your grandma's recipe, she said softly. That evening, Thomas told stories at the kitchen table. Stories about their father falling into the pond chasing a fishing lure. Stories about their grandmother dancing barefoot in the yard during summer storms. The boys listened, not because they were trying to be polite, but because hearing those stories felt like gathering small pieces of something they thought was gone. Weeks passed. The field shifted from green to gold. Caleb's laughter returned first. It surprised them one morning when he slipped in the mud and burst out laughing instead of crying. Thomas chuckled. Ethan grinned. It was a quiet victory. Ethan began talking about school again, about maybe studying agricultural engineering,